Good afternoon, Oriole Nation.
All righty, you're all ready to go. Good? All right. So I'm gonna call the order of the special meeting of Board of Education for the District of North Fond du Lac. Today on Wednesday, July 10th at 4:30 p.m. So just we'll roll call when ready.
All right, Geckerman?
Here.
Hawk? Yeager here, Matthew? Here. And Huntsman.
Here.
Excellent. We have everyone here. Thank you. Next is report of public notification.
So postings at district office, FLC, BAMS, Horseman, and the village.
All right. Pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We will then jump into our first item, which is financials and budget.
So I'm gonna kick it off. We got an interviewer that's gonna help us out. Mike Clark is coming from Baird and he's gonna talk a little bit, but I just want to give a preview, and I think Maria's on her way back at some point now, hopefully. Just so you all know, I'm just gonna share this up here. And for anybody at home, we're very fortunate. We've got an awesome school district going on here right now. And just, this is a list of all the different things that are going on within our world, and we're growing, we're improving, we've got incredible safe schools, we got small class sizes, state-of-the-art classrooms, especially right now with the referendum coming through, financially sound, making sure those things are happening. I think we really are like a really diverse small town with a big town feel. So I think we got a lot of things going for us within our world. This is just a quick basic budgeting 101, showing kind of where we're at in terms of how things are split up here. Salary and fringes are, 75 to 80% of our, budget. The capital is in here, and then we also have that about 14% of special ed transfer that goes back into that, just so you all have understanding that that's pretty much how the spending happens within our arena. We've talked already about this in open before about per pupil and how those aid increases or decreases throughout the years. Again, the last couple of years in this biannual budget was $325, and again, another additional $325 per pupil will be added for this upcoming year. And I'm going to flip through that. Just so everyone's aware, though, in the last year, as we're doing our diligence to be fiscally responsible. At the same time, with inflation in many different cases, we lost over $300,000 in insurance last year. Health insurance this year will increase to about $400,000. Transportation will increase about $200,000. Utilities are going to be about $30,000 up. Salary increases to keep our great staff and keep them within our district and keep them happy and part of our organization. That's going to be part of that as well. ESSER dollars that was coming out through the pandemic are no longer available to districts, and so that was around the tune of $200,000 that we had within our world. We had just this past year, and there's a mandate now for literacy that's out there, Act 20, and that's about $150,000 increase that we're going to have to find monies for to make sure that we can stay in alignment with the state and making that happen. And then, of course, we've had our own referendum here, recurring operational in the last 3 years of $800,000. That falls off in the 25-26 school year. So just giving you kind of a little bit of an update of, where we're at. And I'm going to turn it over kind of just to talk about, how does this look overall within what we have within our budget in general. Mm-hmm. So Maria, you've got the floor, and then I'll turn it over to Mike here just in a second too.
Okay, sounds good. So I've given you 3 different scenarios. The first scenario, the one on top, is the $800,000 current referendum. So I mentioned that falls off after the 24-25 school year. So if you look at that document right through the middle where it's red, that shows our surplus or deficit. Well, they're all deficits. But then you can show how it really compounds as we start in 24-25. We talked about in the past, we've talked about, different projections or different, I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here, but with salaries and wages, and health insurance going up 15% next year and 10% the year after. Those are all factors that have weighed into every year's budget. Those are some of the big things. Salary increases at about 3.5% every year. That's where most of our budget goes. 70% of our budget is salaries and benefits. So you can see that compounding factor. That of course affects our fund balance. And then at the very bottom, it shows the effect on the mill rate. So we've talked about two different scenarios generally. We've talked about an ask versus a need, and that is the second page that I gave you. The ask equals the need. So what I've shown here is what would happen if we just match that budget. So in order to get rid of to get close to balancing that first scenario, the $800,000 scenario, the ask equals the need would take care of those deficits. So in the 24-25 school year, we would increase that non-recurring referendum to 1.6 million. Just keep in mind that 800,000 is already in there, so you're really just increasing it, that 800,000. And then the effect on the mill rate is at the very bottom. And then the second year, it continually increases, and then the ending mill rate 28-29 is $9.99. These could change a little bit yet. We haven't had our audit yet. That's at the end of the month. So this might change just a little bit up or down. But that's the information we have today. We also, I know the board was curious about if we did like just a straight 3 million across the board. And this is showing the effect of that. So 3 million would give us a surplus, which would really be 2.2 million that first year, because again, we have that $800,000 referendum still carrying over. So 3 million the first year, and here the mill rate does the opposite. It jumps up from $8.15 to $10.82, and then it decreases the following years. It would result in a substantial surplus over the 5 years. It does make our fund balance look great, but it would be a challenge to ask that in that first year.
Well, the first year, I thought we were talking about just doing the 800,000 extra in both scenarios, not the 3 million.
Go to the 1.6 million.
Right.
So then, well, yes, you could do that.
So then you would jump from 815 to 1082.
I did run that scenario, but if I recall, the board wanted to see that fund balance go up, and it really wouldn't. It would cause us to break even that first year, the 24-25 school year, but then it wouldn't do anything for the fund balance.
Yeah, you'd end up at 14.3% fund balance based on that, right? Because that's essentially what scenario one is doing in that first year.
Right, exactly. And then you would still end up with those from 25-26 all the way to 28-29, you would still end up with those surpluses and deficits. So you're not gaining anything in the fund balance
Right.
by doing that.
So, kind of that fund balance milestone or goal to be at 20%, is that based off of, I know we talked about that as being like a board guidance or whatever, that policy maybe even, is that based on like our bond rating status, or is there other stuff at play there? Like, where if we say, hey, well, 15% is great because the numbers are so much bigger and all of that, or is there like like, that's the number that we need to be at in order for all the banks and whatnot to be happy.
I'll let Mike speak to fund balance, he was gonna touch on that.
Okay,
Yeah, in terms of the fund balance of 20%, it does have an impact on your credit rating. It's one of the factors. One of the
Okay.
main. There are districts that have the same rating that have lower fund balance, and there are districts that have the same rating as you that have higher fund balance. But then it's the other characteristics, the household income, the valuation behind each student, all those types of things play a factor. So it is a factor. And if you look at the projections on scenario one, you're down to what, a 12% fund balance. You're at 17% in the second scenario, the $3 million. And if you start out at a lower number, you're gonna end up back at that 12%. You started out at 1.6 the first year, not going all the way. You're gonna have the same spot. So that definitely could impact your credit rating the next time you issue debt, which may be, who knows when. So is it a factor? Yes. Is it, I always tell districts, don't make decisions impacting your budget and operations and your instructional decisions. You know, give some thought to the credit rating, but don't make your decision based on what it might do to your credit rating.
okay,
Now, the other factor though, that the drop in the fund balance is going to have is the need for cash flow borrowing.
right,
And there are a lot of districts who cash flow borrow every year, and so it's not uncommon. Your fund balance as it stands today is probably average, maybe a touch below average, but not too far below average. But over time, especially if you look at the scenario one, even if you get the match our need, you see that percentage dropping even though the dollar amount stays fairly stable. And you're comparing it to your
total.
revenues are getting bigger. So this is a percentage is going to continue to get smaller. And that's going to necessitate the need to do more cash flow borrowing. Maybe you can set, maybe the line of credit gets you by a couple of years, but maybe you reach a point over time, even if the fund balance amount stays flat, that you just move to a 9 or 12, 11 month borrowing. In this environment, you are earning good interest, but the short-term rates are really high. So cash flow borrowing is a net loss.
Okay.
You're not going to borrow and turn around and make money on it because you can invest it, but your borrowing rate's going to be high. So those are the two impacts of the fund balance. Then obviously the other factor when you think about fund balance is fund balance has always kind of been there for if something unexpected comes up and you need some money. If that dwindles or even if it stays the same, if you would tap into it for some reason, then that just kind of magnifies the decline from a percentage standpoint.
Okay.
But in terms of, there have been districts who go to an operating referendum to maybe help support or replenish their fund balance. And they communicate that during the referendum process. So part of this money is to build their fund balance. I'm working with a district who didn't do that. They asked for the money, they got the money to rebuild their fund balance, and they did not build their fund balance. Actually, it's lower now. So now they're lining up to go back for their operating referendum this November, and that's gonna be a very difficult conversation to have with your community. So if that's really the intent, I'm not saying that's a decision you're making, but if a district does make that decision, you better follow through on it. The other issue, probably more specific to you, is given the fact that you're looking at a pretty significant increase over your current non-recurring operating 800,000, and the fact that you might end up in the 3 million to 3.5 million, which seems reasonable, that's a big jump. And then to put money on top of that just to have in the bank, maybe some people will understand it and say, yep, we need to do that. Other people will say, well, why are you taking more money than you need? And so that that's another conversation you might have. It might be a turnoff for some people. And the fact that referendums are not passing at the same rates they were a couple of years ago, and how important these dollars are. Because you're asking for dollars for the budget you're gonna be in when the electors
Right.
go
Kind
go
of
to
neat.
the ballot. You need it. So the less other conversations you can have, focusing on funding maintaining your program, the things that are up there, the class sizes, the staffing levels, that should be the primary conversation. Dollars for fund balance may be distracting to some.
So, Mike, when you work with other districts, what do you see as a common fund balance number? I mean, I think it has to have a place in the conversation, because otherwise, I mean, you're gonna continue to dwindle your balance, right? So.
At some point, so I'm working with a larger school district in the Milwaukee area. 4 years ago, they had a 42% fund balance. At the end of the upcoming year, they'll probably, after the end of 24, 25, they'll probably go to 10% fund balance.
Okay.
They made a decision that they can be on the ballot in November for an operating question, but it doesn't start until 25, 26. They made the decision that they're going to use fund balance before they ask for more money from the board. So it's really, people approach it, some districts, you don't touch the fund balance. They don't care what's going on. The fund balance is sacred, it's there. And so those are the extremes. So it really comes down to, can you survive at a 10% fund balance? Sure. Districts are doing it right now. Is it ideal? No, we wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah.
We recommend a level that if when we're asked, is a level where you don't have to cash flow borrow.
If we do, instead of the 2.2 the first year, if we did 800,000 like we talked about, and then 3 million every year after that, the fund balance is about 15%, except for the very last year. I don't know that we're gonna do better than 15%.
No, that's basically where you entered, where you're at this year, 14% at the end of this 23-24. I say this year, last year. So how districts would approach it, and maybe this is, maybe the amount you ask for gives you a little room that if things go well, you will have surpluses in certain years.
But it's not your primary objective just to build the.
Right, it's kind of if things go well, we hope to do this type of
Okay.
an approach versus, okay, we're putting $400,000 a year in specifically for this purpose.
Right.
Subtle difference, but, these are pretty substantial, tax increases. And so I guess I kind of right. I kind of like, more and more districts are going for the ask equal need. Now, if you weren't facing necessarily a deficit in 24, 25, there I could see maybe a year where you kind of could prop up or allocate some dollars to build fund balance. But when you're asking for a referendum to go layer on top of an existing one, I don't know if that's the time to do that. I definitely, and I like the step up for a few reasons. One, it matches to what you're saying you need. And if you want to add $100,000 to say, we're going to, at a minimum, add $100,000 to fund balance each year, well, you better do it. And two, and if other things go well, you can maybe add a little bit more if the state comes in with a little bit more money, you can add some more money to the fund balance. But I like ending at the 3.5 because you're gonna be back to the voters.
Yeah, you're already at,
And that next number could be 4 million. So if you go with a 3 million flat, then you're looking at a $1 million increase at that point versus kind of stepping it up as you go.
I just worry about on the referendum itself. Like when we did the 800,000 last time, we said we're gonna do 800,000 for 4 years, or it was worded basically like that. Or if you do the other one, you're gonna say we're gonna ask for whatever it is for this year, 800 extra, and 2.5, and then 2.9, and 3.1, and 3.5. It's like right in your face how often you see that number. You see 4 years at 3 million, it has a different psychological effect than 2.5, 2.9, 3, 3.5. You're seeing actual dollars there. So I just asked like 4 or 5 people, if you saw it this way or that way, which would you be more likely? And everybody said 3 million, when 4 years at 3 million, rather than spelling out 4 different amounts like that hit you right in the face. But that's a small sample.
I think my concern with going with 3 million is kind of what you touched on a little bit, Mike, is at the end of it, you're a $500,000 deficit. Like, you actually don't have enough. So now when you go to ask again, you're gonna be that 500,000 like behind. So I feel like,
Because unless something changes at the state level, you are never gonna get out of this referendum process.
right,
And so Rick, if you knew this was gonna be it and you could stay at 3 million forever,
Well, no, I know.
and I know you can't, and I know that's not what you're saying, but I think the fact that districts who've been doing this for more years than you have, that number always gets larger. And I can't think of, sometimes people try to keep it flat, and there's a district I can think about them, but so we're gonna make the flat number work. It just went up a little bit above the previous one and it didn't work. They're running deficits 3 years in a row. So I think it's important that you try to keep in mind that need is more likely to grow in the future than to stay flat or to definitely decrease. And you kind of get people used to those increases over time.
so is there a communication piece that has been successful with that? Like, as Rick was pointing out, some of that dialogue is important, right? Like, it's easier to see one number and maybe digest that versus, oh my gosh, when is the escalation gonna end? Or, because that could be the negative component of the growing request, but there can also be a positive in that ask what you need for, right? Like, we're projecting to grow as a district, we're projecting to have these, costs, and we're projecting to cover it in this way. Is that, are there other techniques or whatever that you've seen be successful?
Yeah, and we can share some things districts have done and some, charts always work. And I think a lot of people understand this is what we need. And I'll back up for a second. Part of the conversation is, what has the district done to minimize what you ask from the voters? And we've had that conversation. I know you've done some things. But so after doing this is what we're projecting we need. And these are the variables that went into that to determine, we already know what the state budget is for this upcoming year, as far as the 325. The ESSER monies are gone. Those things are pretty clear. It gets a little fuzzier in future years because you have other state biennium budgets. You don't know if the 325 is gonna hold, it's gonna be bigger, it's gonna be less. I think there's gonna be a lot of pressure to increase that. Because the number of schools going for operational referendum is only increasing. The dependency of school districts on, I know we talked about this last time I was here, is just growing. The dollar amounts districts are asking for, the percentage of their budget they're tied to non-recurring revenues is a little frightening, actually. And so the state may do something, but you can't count on it. And so based on what we know today, these are the numbers, and the conversation is, we've taken these steps to manage our expenditures. This is what we feel we need to keep operating at this level. And based on projections, here are our deficits, and here are the amounts we're gonna ask for to cover those.
Like if there's an unexpected increase in Madison and we get, a bigger influx than what we would expect, we'd still do whatever we get approved, but you wouldn't have to spend all of that referendum money then, right? You can hold on to that.
You don't even have to levy it. It's levy authority. So that's what happened a lot when they moved the low revenue limit ceiling up to 11,000 from 10,000. There was districts who had referendums in place that said, wow, we weren't banking on that, so they levied less. They didn't levy their full authority. Not only did they not spend it, they didn't even levy it.
I see.
Because they also know at some point, they're gonna be back to the voters.
Mhm.
Now, you could in those years say, okay, we're gonna because our fund balance is not great, we're gonna levy a portion of it or all of it to help support our fund balance. You can make those types of decisions. But again, the referendum just gives you the authority. You're under no obligation to actually levy or spend the dollars. And so things like that can happen. That was a big jump for districts. And so, is that happening again anytime soon? It's hard to tell. That was the largest increase they ever had. And I think part of the reason it was so large is that they're sensing some pressure building up, especially for the lower spending districts, that if the state didn't do something, then lawyers might be called. So. So I mean, there's different ways to approach it. I was on a call this morning with another district who historically has gone 2 years at a time. And they want to get out of that mode because you're never out of referendum mode when you go 2 years at a time. You just finish counting the ballots, and that following spring you're starting to plan your survey or do whatever, and look at your. So 2 years is a little tight, but if and I think the community's been supportive in this area. It's just the dollar amounts are going to be different, whichever route you go. It's going to be quite an adjustment from the $800,000 level. I do like ending, I think I've mentioned last time here, I do like ending and non-recurring with the last year ending in an odd year, because it sets up well for the November, April renewal. Because realistically, well, you couldn't do anything for 24, 25, but you could be back in the spring for 25, 26 going forward. And so, and then if you get on a conversation we had this morning, presidential elections have been, as a whole, the most successful for school districts. If you can kind of get on a 4-year cycle and be on that date, the larger turnouts tend to be more positive for school districts. So, and that lines up with the 9-year sequence again.
For what it's worth, I guess my preference would be to have the step up also. To me, again, that's been repeated here, but to me, it looks to the average voter that, okay, they're only asking for what they think they need each year. and it's common sense that salaries will go up, so that number and other expenses will go up, so that the referendum ask will go up a little bit. I guess.
So I think I align with what you're saying there as well, but I also, I don't want to make the decision solely on the fund balance, but ending at 12% to me is a little bit, scary, considering the fact that our goal would be 20, before we started this process. So maybe there's another, slight revision to it that allows us to at least maintain the 14 to 15% fund balance.
Aside on that, the percentage drops down to 12, but the actual dollar amount is pretty similar.
Mhm.
I know everything's gonna cost more in those over the next 4 years, but
I think given like the inflation, given the growth of our district, given that we want to keep and sustain those things, we need to do whatever's possible to get this passed.
Mhm.
And so we have to think not as much, at least from my perspective, about the fund balance. It's important, but it shouldn't be the driver within our decision. The decision should be, how do we get this to be, successful for our community and for our district.
Right.
We do have options for borrowing,
Okay.
where if this doesn't pass, there are no other, we need this
Yeah.
to pass.
Right.
But right now, our borrowing would just be to make our December payroll.
Okay.
So, because our aid comes that first Monday in December, and so we need to make that December 15th payroll. Or our November payroll, our November 30th payroll. So right now, that's the only time that we would need to borrow. So I'm working with the bank on securing a line of credit. Now, that's not to say, Mike touched on in the future, we might need that to be more long-term, but right now, it's just a real small window that we would need to borrow.
but we don't have one now. Historically, we've got
We
one,
have,
but we've
yeah.
never used it.
Right, we've never used it in the last, I believe, 3 years. I haven't even gotten one, because we've been in pretty good shape, so,
Okay.
yeah.
And there are a lot more unknowns the further you get out. So, it's tough to say if that 12% is, maybe it is 14% if we're able to, manage some of the escalating costs and things like that. Maybe there's more revenues,
Insurance is a big,
Mhm.
we haven't seen what our new pharmacy provider can do yet.
Yeah.
We could have more kids coming into the district. There are a lot of unknowns, but
Right.
we can't rely on all of that right now. We can't bank on it.
And I think one of the things is kind of tying your hands a bit, or I shouldn't say tying your hands, because you can do whatever you want. But complicating it is the fact that you're starting your first year with an $800,000 deficit. Because if you look at the ask equals need, you're basically starting, your next time you go to referendum, you're starting from essentially a balanced budget. So you're just kind of dealing with the next year's increases.
Mhm.
Here, you're dealing with next year's increases, being this year, and coming off a deficit budget. So it's kind of compounding. That's why that,
Mhm.
and if you can kind of get yourself to a balanced position at the end, and then you're just talking, okay, what are our new costs going forward? And maybe that's an opportunity to maybe add a little bit for other things. Some districts will ask for additional dollars to put into Fund 46 for capital projects. Some districts will ask for dollars to add to the fund balance, those types of things. You can decide whether now is the time to do that or not, but I guess you'll have other opportunities to go to the voters for those types of dollars in the future.
Can I just, one other reason too, I didn't mention about why I like the step up is not having that huge jump in the mill rate the first year, which I think could scare some voters off, even though it'll go down after that, you know, it's maybe inching up is, I don't know. Be better.
Yeah, and I think it shows that we put thought into it, that we really did look at what our expenditures are going to be, and we're asking for what we need. I think it just shows that we've done our due diligence and we really know what those needs are.
But that would be part of the story if we go in that direction. You have to
Sure.
indicate that, and including what Mike said too, is like, what have we done for cost savings to, you know, to make that happen as well, as we've shared with y'all too, but.
Yep.
So people realize that we're doing everything in our power, you know, to make the best decision here for the community and for our schools.
And the second option, I mean, the difference is 1.3 million. We're asking more on the 3 million a year one, if you add them up, right? That's why the fund balance.
Yeah.
And so 1.3 million gets you 4% or whatever it was. That's all, as Rick was saying, all because of the beginning portion mostly.
That's also, see, I'm not sure I would advocate putting 3 million in this coming year's budget.
No, I agree.
So that would changes that by 16.
Yes, so that's the 1.3, because if you go to 1.6,
Yeah.
it's 1.4. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The
So I think your fund balance
the
ends
difference in total,
the same.
the 3 and the step up is basically nothing.
Right.
So in that case, then we're still trying to explain difference between year one and years 2 through 5, right, or the next 4 years. So like to whoever asked the question was a good question, like how do you explain that? How do you explain the change?
Well, I mean, you can spin it however you want, I guess. And I'm willing, I mean, it turns out the same either way. I mean, whichever way we go, it ends the same way. My concern is showing four different numbers compared to one number. That's my concern. In the end, it comes out the same within a few dollars. We can spin the story however we want to spin it, but when I picture, you know, the referendum that we used last time, I looked at the question and then I picture it showing 5 amounts.
Yeah.
That makes me nervous.
So then your mill rate, if you did 1.6 in 24-25, you would go to about 9.11. And then so you're going up almost $1. And then in 25-26, you go up another $1 to about that 10.23.
What our mill rate is, if I'm reading this right, sorry if I'm not, just call me out. So we're at 815 this past year. That's with 800,000 in.
Right.
And then we go to 911 with 1.6 million in on the ask versus need one. Is that additional 800,000 the difference of that, like the $1 more? Or is that, like, is a portion of that 800,000 extra that's already reoccurring?
A portion of that is the 800,000.
So like if we didn't have that's probably on this one, huh?
Yeah, so if we didn't pass it, we'd go to 814.
Gotcha.
We'd just go down a penny.
And then historically, I think we were shared with our bill rate over like the last 15 years. That I remember right, it was $8 to $10, right, kind of flowed through. Is that, I mean, that's what I saw, okay? So none of this, other than if we were due 3 million across, does it go over that 10? Right, so like the ask versus need one is very familiar with the community on the mill rate compared to previous years. That's safe to say?
That's fair.
Correct. It's just property values are
Correct.
a lot higher.
The other thing, this is a kind of a side issue, but I'm thinking of when we put up some kind of calculator to show people what the impact is.
Yeah.
Like I've got my property tax bill, and it's like 2 hours trying to figure out how I didn't come close to the 815 that we had last year. So I don't know if one of you guys can help me look at it.
I'll send you something that walks you through that, how you can get back to the school rate for the school portion.
Okay, if you can send me that.
I'll send it to Ray if you could.
Because I don't think when we did it last time, well, I know the calculator didn't work right. Wasn't even close for mine. So I want us to be right on the calculator.
Yeah, one, I don't like calculators because they're not always right. They're probably, and the people that use the calculators are the people who will know it's not right.
That's true. Absolutely.
You know, so I always, you know, dissuade it because there's so many other variables in terms of aid and valuation increases and things like that in terms of because if you just look at the dollar amount, and so
So how do you explain, which is I'm fine, if we somehow explain to somebody what their impact is gonna be, how do we do that?
yeah, so we have some things about understanding your tax bill. There's some things we could maybe incorporate, things, you know, that could impact. I like just a chart to say kind of ranges of property value, and if you're in this range, this is gonna be your impact. It's not gonna be specific to, but maybe you go every $50,000 or something like that. We could definitely look at some other things. Now, historically, when we had valuation increases of 1-2%, the calculators are a little bit more reliable, that's in the ballpark. But some of the valuation increases we've seen over the last 3-4 years, so we've had this conversation, it can really change, because people have this dollar amount, this is gonna be my dollar amount increase. Well, within a municipality, in terms of assessments, if people got assessed higher than their neighbors, the calculator's not gonna match. There's just too many other things to cause that calculator to be different than what shows up in December.
Am I oversimplifying by saying, Mike, that the 815 is really an average? Because every municipality,
Again, it's the difficulty that school districts are required to allocate their rate on an equalized value, and then the municipalities distribute it on an assessed value. That's one of the big factors. But what I'll send you will show you how you get back to the 815. Now, it might be a penny off depending on how things around, but it's, yeah. So I'll send that to you so you get there. One of the things the balance is spending all your time talking about all the things that could cause the tax impact to be different, gets people uneasy and concerned. I mean, you need to make them aware that there are variables out there that could cause, but you know, you want to kind of give them a reasonable expectation. But you can't control if somebody's valuation assessment goes up 30% in their community and everybody else goes up 10%. Well, their tax bill is going to go up more than what the calculator or a chart is going to say. It just is.
I think the story is more on the slides is this is the facts.
Yep.
And this is what we've done thus far. Because that 1.1 million that's been saved so far, before even looking at this, I think that, you know, as a community member shows that we're really all in on trying to find ways to save money. And then I think to your point, if I saw on something it was 214,000 was the average house, right? And so maybe that's our barometer to show that's the constant, that's your 3 million, right? You could say, hey, if your house is 214, here's the impact it would have. And then if my house is 150, maybe we link how they find out what their house is worth. You know what I mean? I don't like, just so they can find their house worth and then say, okay, let me get a rough estimate. I mean, I know there's a lot more to it than that, but
Yeah,
like,
yeah, but most people turn to their assessed value.
yeah,
And again, it doesn't work backwards to the school's equalized value very well, depending on how far off their assessments are from equalized.
But I think for those individuals, like what Rick is saying, I wonder, and I agree with you, John, like this is the focus. But if we have some individuals who are in that ballpark, we have some answers, like some base answers from the graph
Sure.
chart, and then noting that there are other variables than just by
figuring this out
Yeah.
mathematically, that you're not gonna be able to, based on assessed value, other things like that they know that
We
you can't.
have about a 12-page document on understanding your tax bill.
So it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
It's, it's, because, the common belief is if my assessment goes up, my taxes are automatically gonna go up. That's not true. If your assessment goes up, but you go up less than everybody else, your taxes are going down.
Sure.
So there's a lot of things, and again, the valuation increases we've seen over the last 3 years have really magnified some of those other variables that cause variation in what people's expectations are based on what the school's saying versus what shows up in the bill in December.
I think what our best possibility of success is that our relationship with the community. We don't have, a terribly negative thing, they're past problems that make people not want to spend money in their schools. We have, especially with the school families, we have people who want to be here and they want to have the kids here, and if they can't get in on open enrollment, they move out here and pay more than asking price on houses to do so. So we got to nurture that group again, just like we did with the building referendums, get the grassroots school parents out. And hopefully that they'll understand. I mean, they'll still have to sit down and decide, can we afford to vote for this and stuff like that, of course, but I think we don't have to get over that hurdle like some districts might first before then trying to convince them. So, just a thought.
And one other longer term thing to keep in mind, doesn't this probably have much impact on this referendum, I think but possibly next, is the district does have some Fund 38 debt that comes out of your government movement, and that'll be paid off, so those dollars will be freed up for another purpose. So maybe at that point, when you're back in, November 28, whatever the date might be, is you'll have that 200,000, you can either reduce your ask, or you could say, we're gonna dedicate that $200,000 to rebuild our fund balance. And then still be able to deal just with the increase in the cost the next time around. Again, it doesn't necessarily help your fund balance now, but it's something to.
Yeah, it's a plan, right?
Yeah.
So, that makes sense.
Yeah, you definitely can't forget about the fund balance, because at some point, it is gonna become more problematic. There's been one time I remember it was difficult to get cash flow borrowings done. We got them done. It wasn't easy, that one year, but it was, we got through it. But it's definitely something wrong with that, but something like that might be an option. That, and if you had if your ask isn't that much of an increase, maybe you would also include an additional 100,000 or 200,000 and build that back up at that time, so.
Well, we can also impact the fund balance by what we did this year too, with like the 1.1 in savings. I know this board's the district's gonna stay committed to finding every dollar we can find, and then that will just be net dollar.
Right.
Right, that'll end at the end, and, I think that's our commitment, that's our accountability.
Well, and I think as it goes out, because it is a forecast, like there may be more opportunities for us at that point.
And again, depending what the state does in their next biannual, that could be one way or the other. So that's just those unpredictable.
And this is assuming it just stays the same,
Right.
Correct.
so,
Yes. Which we have to.
yeah, no, I understood, yeah. But then, like you said, who knows?
So for the $213,000 house, that's the average the first year, it's gonna be $200.
For off the,
The 3 mil or after just the regular?
Off the 1.6.
Yeah.
and then it looks like it'd probably be through the next, it could probably go up by,
It's 200, then 121,
Yeah.
then 18, then 38, then 24.
so.
tonight was more discussion, conversation, laying this out there, having Mike here to share some of his professional wisdom with us as well. I don't know, we don't have to come to this is what we're doing at the end of tonight. I think that would be something that we look at for July though, so that we know going into August what that,
Yeah.
will be. So we're set on that, but I guess I would just encourage everybody to just like talk and like just examine this more. If you have further questions for us or Mike or anyone else, we're able to,
Well, it seems like we're set on the total package, right? The total amount.
yes.
So the only real open question is, do we step it or
Or ask one full.
or flat? That's the question we're at, right?
Right.
That's
Mhm.
where we're at.
So wouldn't that discussion happen now so that we can have, right? I mean, like.
Yeah, I mean, unless there's other factors to consider, but if we're ready to have that conversation.
But you wouldn't like vote to do it until.
Till July.
Correct.
But yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I
that's
mean.
what I'm saying.
I just don't want
Yeah,
to
that makes
wait,
sense.
Yeah.
and then unless we come in that day to have that discussion and then vote after, but I know a lot of us like to have a discussion first
Mhm.
so that we're not doing it last minute, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just, I have no additional, you've done great, everyone, like explaining it, so I don't have any additional questions. I don't know if anyone else has other items that they would like to get off their mind and discuss before we punch this and, add it to the July session.
Is there any urgency to having that decision made tonight?
No, I think getting all questions answered, I mean, yeah, until what, is it August 28th to get the ballot to the municipalities, so.
I mean, it'd be one thing if we were arguing about what the net
Right.
amount is. but
Sure.
I think we're all in agreement on that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's just more or less a marketing question, I think.
Yes.
And that just comes down to opinion, I guess, more than anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you go out and look at, well, you can't look at the DPI used to have a really nice historical referendum page, but they went to something else. You'll see districts approach it both ways. You do see more districts moving towards the step. I think just because of the dollar amounts, they're trying to minimize some of the asking for the higher amounts before they need it sort of approach, but there's still districts that ask for the flat amount, so. We haven't done any sort of analysis to say if there's a passage rate different one versus the other. I think it comes down to the communication effort, your relationship with the community, those are the biggest variables.
Mhm.
Whichever route you go, I think the biggest variables are what was described here. The community cares about the district, supports the district, how you communicate the need and how you can use these dollars, that's what it really comes down to, so.
I think the one thing, just to say, there is a difference though between the two in the dollar amount you're speaking to, Rick. Because this one would be 15 million and this one would be 13.7 over time. So like,
Well, I don't think, I guess that's a question. In the first year, in this coming year, I wouldn't go to I would just add the 800,000, I wouldn't go to 3 million the first year.
gotcha.
So that's why I'm saying they're the same.
Okay.
I think taking that, because that would really, because in your need one, you've got it at the 800,000 additional.
Mhm.
And then the other one goes up a lot more. I mean, so I mean, if we did that 1082, that's a big number to go from where we're at now to that.
Yeah. Great.
So I would say if we, in either scenario, we just go up an extra 800,000, it's coming.
Okay. So when we come back in July, and what's the question? I just wanna make sure we have all the dialogue that we need.
What I'm hearing here, at least, is again, the marketing, like which way do you want? Do you want the step or do you want the?
Okay.
lump sum.
If we all agree on the 800,000
Correct.
for this coming year.
Right.
So the two options would be what we have for ask first need, only change to the 2.21 would be, it would go to 1.6 instead of 3 the first year.
Correct.
Okay,
Right.
so that would be
That's my.
So then,
that's my-
that's what you're saying, is like essentially the same value.
same value
Right.
then. Yeah.
Right.
Mary, could you, excuse me,
Yeah, go ahead.
could you run that scenario then, like Rick had said, not with the 3 million for next year?
Yeah,
and
I
just send
actually
it
just
out?
jotted it down. It would just change, the non-recurring referendum one would be 1.6 million rather than 3. And the mill rate down at the bottom would be 9.11. And everything else should stay the same, correct?
Depending on how much you actually spent, there might be an aid impact. So it might cause the 27, no, excuse me, the 20. So in 24, 25, so the idea would be that additional dollar up to the 3 million, just to bank it, not spend it. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
In 25, 26.
24, 25. If you went to 3 million right away in 24, 25.
Oh, right, yeah.
So yeah,
So
so
we took that off.
if you're not,
Right.
you weren't, that wasn't impacting aid, so yes, it would be the same. So yeah, so it would be 911, then up to the 1023, the 983, and the 966 and so on. So it makes it a bigger jump from year 1 to year 2.
Then our fund balance line, the percent would change year by year, but the last year would be the same.
Correct.
Essentially about, yeah.
I know it's, we're referring to this as marketing, but I also feel like, I don't know, like my mind doesn't like trying to put something out there that has us at a deficit, right? Like knowingly, we're gonna be at a $500,000 deficit in that final year. I don't know, like, to me, that's just one of the pieces that kind of sticks in my mind. Because then when you go into that next year, you're already, now you're going from 3 million to whatever, is it 4, or,
Right.
But I think if we adjust the last year of that one, then we have this other option that's already there. Because it starts with 1.6, goes to 3.5 at the end, you know what I mean? Like, to me,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, so I think then we're out of the game of, hey, the language piece of 3 million, right, across.
Mhm.
That's just my opinion of it is, if the purpose of selecting the ask 2.2, or which one would be different now, but the 3 million is the consistency of the 3 million. That's the difference.
Yeah.
Right, just to be able to say it. So we're gonna assume that $500,000 loss that last year, because we're gaining $500,000, 25.
In year 2,
Yeah.
right?
Which you're gonna try to convince the community members that we're gonna bank that and save it for the year that we're gonna be in a deficit.
So if we don't hit 512 and we come 412, we lost.
Right, and to me, that's more difficult to explain
Mm-hmm.
than it is to say, we're just matching our ask with our need.
Yeah.
One other consideration, the district's still projecting growth, new homes development.
Mhm.
One thing that's could be part of communication for the ask equals need is that it allows new growth that hasn't occurred yet to help participate in the tax impact of the larger amounts.
Mhm.
Say that again.
So homes that aren't here yet, so a home that isn't built till 25, 26, that homeowner will miss out on the first year, or maybe the second year. This way, you get more homes, new growth to help support the amounts as they get higher, if you continue to grow. So if subdivisions continue to go in, you'll have more valuation to help support those higher
Drop
dollar
them.
amounts as they grow. As your valuation grows, the dollar amount you're asking for grows, and they're more aligned that way. Is it a huge factor? You know, I don't know, it depends on how much you grow. But I think that's definitely, you know, consideration. What do you have, what are you using for valuation? Growth, remember?
I think we did 2%.
Yeah. Which, you know, if you, the state as a whole last year was at 1.6% of new growth. And if you run above that, so if you run above 2%, these numbers will look better as far as the tax rate. Again, kind of discounting inflationary growth and just focusing on new growth. So.
And on the flip side, people that think that they're only going to be in the area for 2 years, they're getting the brunt of.
Yeah, screw them because they're humans.
Yeah.
They don't give a crap.
Yeah.
Hit 'em up when they go.
I forgot where I'm on.
That was Rick, man.
I think Papa might hit them.
All right. Any other questions, or we good?
Good.
All right, well, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Right.
Yeah, I'll have it sent out tomorrow.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
I think we sent it out when we had the conversations before, but, I'll get it to Maria tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Maybe tonight. I am, but I usually plug back in. I get home.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Drive safe.
Yeah.
Bye. Nice. Oh, anytime.
All right. Our next item is policy updates, our first reading.
So Terry and Jacob, you can just take it.
Yeah.
Take it. You got it, guys. We trained you up. It's all good.
Honestly, there's not a whole lot of major changes, and if you all can jump in too, I'm gonna go through some of those with you all so you can see. Yes.
Thanks, Maria.
Have a good night.
Night.
See ya.
Good night, Maria.
You all should have, just a reminder, you all should have access to these materials in a second. The big things, technical corrections are on the very bottom here. These are like one word changes. They're nothing where we're flipping the wording or the content at all. So it's just punctuation, changes of, some terms, whatnot, but nothing changing the content of the policy. You can always look over all these, but there's a series of those that you can walk through if you are interested. But, that's part of this process too. We're not going through that in our time tonight. The bigger area here is, I'm just gonna make sure I'm in the right one. Yes. This is the overall list. Again, we get from Neola, we sit down with them 2 times a year. They send us like the updates. This comes from federal, state, you name it. They try to update our policies as best to keep concurrent with wherever the law is at the time. And then we sit down in our committee to say like, yeah, we make sense of this, or sometimes there's some questions about like, you have options, you have choice to change. But for the most part, Neola does a lot of like the front work where we're not having to make a ton of decisions because they're staying within alignment with the law, if that makes sense for everybody. So I'm not gonna go through every single one of these. I'm gonna bring up the bigger ones. If you all, Jacob or Terry, if you got other ones that you want us to really get on, that would be, we can go through that, but I just wanna bring up a couple of the bigger ones that, I felt like were one of those areas. And one of them has to be with leave. It has to do with military leave. We talked about this, 3431, and it's overall employee leaves for that matter. And it's talking about the language in terms of like, how do we
if someone is to leave for military duty, what do we do as a district in terms of paying, that person? Do we continue to pay that person? Do they get, whatever it might be, or are they unpaid for that period of time? Traditionally, we've done the unpaid, okay? And so if someone left, they'd be unpaid for their service, but when they return, they would have their job back. It wouldn't be like, you're not out of that. Similar to, I don't want to put in the same reference point, but jury duty, you leave, it's unpaid, you get paid by the state for that day, like whatever that dollar amount is, probably $8 or $9 or whatever to sit on the juries. But that's the same thing. So here, literally, we've said, let's continue that with the unpaid leave for if that ever happens to be that's the gist of this one, okay? I'm just gonna go through the other major, or a little larger one was, let's see here, 63.
So we don't pay if they're on jury duty?
We don't pay. I think we do. It's that we do pay for their day, but they can't then collect, if they got a choice, you can either collect the dollars from the state or else the state from your dollars that you're making. So you can choose to go unpaid and then make whatever you're making there, or you keep the dollars that you're making for that.
Your regular salary, and then you have to
Yes.
turn in the jury.
Correct.
To the district.
Which most people don't take the jury pay, they stay with their contracted pay for that day. Okay. Let's see here, I'll go here. Lactating employees, basically saying you have areas and locations within your facility that helps mothers to make sure that they can provide for their children too during the workday. The one thing that it says at the very end, it says this policy does not include students. Any student is expressing breast milk following the birth of a child should contact the principal, as we said, to discuss arrangements for that kind of thing. So that was a little larger one and major changes. Again, I'm just covering like significant content change here. This is another one, use of social media. In the past, we were like wide open and anybody could respond to anything within their jurisdiction. So like, let's say a post was made on our website by one of a teacher or whatever it might be, or someone who's got that access to our Facebook page. A comment's made. In the past, that person or anybody could respond to them who had access to that Facebook page. We want to like tighten that a little bit more to having like an agreed upon response before we just send something out where it is. And this is classic, media specialists who would come in and say like, okay, before we even respond, we want to make sure we respond appropriately. The one where we were wide open, anybody can respond, anybody can put it back. I want to get to a point where the district leadership or others know before the post came out there that was offensive or whatever it might be, we could address that and give appropriate response back versus putting it on the shoulders of other people that it could turn into something else that we don't want to run into. So that's
if they're just representing the NFDL schools
correct.
page.
Just the NFDL. We're just talking NFDL schools page, Facebook, website, you name it. So, and we allow for that chat to come back. We allow for people, make an opinion or statement on there. And in doing so, we have to follow up if there's something that needs to be followed up on.
We could, and I'm not recommending this or whatever, but we could shut off all comments,
We could.
right?
That's another
Yeah,
option.
that was one of the options.
Yeah.
So, but we felt like if we do that, or we've got to give, some trust factor. We get a lot of amazing comments on our Facebook pages. It was like, wow, that's great. This is amazing. Congratulations. You name it.
Sure.
That bolsters some good camaraderie too. So I don't want to completely shut that off. But if we had a scenario where it did involve a controversial kind of comment, we want to be able to like limit that number of people who can actually respond to that, and it's actually through the district personnel versus anybody who has access, if that makes sense. So that's the option we chose, and unless you got major kickback one way or another here.
So we just designate like one or two people or?
Correct.
Just a very small number?
So yeah, it would be like myself or, another person in like Adam Broughton or a principal. Even though, like individuals like Kurt Wismer and Sarah Drews and other people have access to loading things up on that Facebook page, we would say, if you receive a comment or a post, please come back to us so we can appropriately respond back if we need to, versus putting them out there and responding in a way that might not be in alignment with what we're trying to do.
So it seems, this is a little off the side, but there's that North Fond du Lac app, school district app. It seems like all the news that gets posted on Facebook also gets posted on that, is that correct?
It does.
Okay.
It's like linked exactly. So any of our social media sites generates right in that app as well.
Okay, 'cause I know some people don't want Facebook or don't want, and so that.
Right.
And it wasn't, for some reason it got deleted off the app store,
Okay,
but I worked with Jen and Ivan and it's back out
Okay.
there now.
good.
So it's working. But I wanted to give people an alternative.
Yeah. And the other place too, you can find it right, it's on our website. On the bottom of our website, I think we got the website up here. So if you go back up, on the homepage, down behind, stay in touch with Facebook, here's all the posts. And anybody can click in and see exactly what that is. Even if they don't have Facebook, it'll at least give them a post and viewability of that one area.
That app isn't too bad though, then.
No, we looked at a little bit of a different one this year, and there were some people, trying to sell us on, it was a pretty good thing, but we had everything that they were talking about of keeping in alignment, of making sure our people, or our community and our families know what's going on in multiple different areas, and that's really the purpose, to keep that updated and moving. So go ahead, Steve.
Is it possible to put a link on the front page where they can go to the app store then if they want the
That's a
app?
great suggestion. We can definitely do that. Let me just roll it in here. And that's kind of coming back to your point of not finding it before and just give them access to that as well. So,
Well, there's the post about the open.
yeah,
There it is.
that-
The link to the spreadsheet.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I was curious if we made it.
Yeah.
I think there's really only one other one that's really added some major content, and I'm just trying to look at, I believe it's tech director stuff. I'm just gonna find out what that is. 7540. Okay. And again, not a lot of craziness here, but this is in terms of devices and how we collect devices in our districts and who does that, and really just clarifying that a little bit deeper in our policy. We didn't have that, or it hasn't been in most policies, and so Neil is just making sure that we do that. On each of our devices, we have a label with the district's name and identification number that's placed for that student, so we know that it's there, all right? They wanted to clarify that and then shut down some of the other areas, which those are other options for us to do, but this is what we do currently. All right. And then it talks about use of district-owned devices. They're checked up through the library. All right. So they barcode it and they just go boom, scan it. And then we know that we've got record of that. They're also in a Google system too. So we got 2 different backups. So we're well aware of that. Ivan does all this work. Which I think there's a statement in here too, is who is making most of this happen. It's our director of technology, which is, or information technology director right here, so that they know that it goes to them for any kind of issues or concerns, or the district administrator if that person's not available. Let's see here, if there's anything else here. If a piece of equipment, it's sent to the information technology director. These are just the gaps that were some of them here. If a device is lost, they can contact the principal or the information director should be notified. And that's basically it. Were there any other policies that you felt that there was significant content that we needed to address with the larger group? These were the larger ones that I felt needed a little bit of conversation, or at least sharing with y'all.
I mean, I don't feel like there were a lot of, I think you covered most of the ones that had options, right? There were plenty that we went through.
Right.
But most of them were pretty straightforward. Sometimes it's just wording change.
Or state statute change, more or less.
So these were under that volume 33, number 1, is that what they were there?
Yes, that's correct. And then what we'll do is we'll start going through volume 32 for the next year already for summer, so it just keeps going as we keep going through that.
I saw one on public record. Is there any change of significance there?
No, I'll double check though for y'all. It just talks about we have to have a place for 7 years, which we already had, to keep records after students leave. And then is there a person in the district who kind of like monitors that and keeps that in check? We use our district office people. They're the ones who are making sure that it's checked by each of the schools. I mean, it's mainly the high school, right? Because all your kids are leaving. We just have to have that place somewhere and have it available that if anybody needed those records after, the 7 years, but after the 7 years, then we move it out. It is a space issue. I mean, I will say that because it takes up filing cabinets and, the bigger the school, the more you have, but that's literally what that says here, Steve.
In the past, they've notified each graduate if they could, that it's available. If they wanted to come and get it, they could have it. Otherwise, they were going to be destroyed, at a certain point. I don't know if they still do that.
No, I think they say it's here. We can make copies for you if you want, but it just stays in our.
But I mean, after the 7 years.
Oh, after the 7 years, yes.
Before just wholesale dumping.
I think it's kind of like, hey, if this is something you want after the 7 years, you need to come back to us. We're not going to reach out to you because that's a lot of.
That's a good point.
Trying to get a hold of people.
I got 3 of them in the bottom drawer in the back of a file cabinet in my office.
Yeah.
Never looked at them since they got them.
Any other things that you all want to see within this? And again, you all have access to look at this more in depth if you'd like, but those were the bigger ones that really, I think, bared some options that we could share with you what we were going through.
Okay.
Fair. I'm going to shift to Title IX. That's okay with everybody. And this is you all got a summary and you can go through this. This is really kind of explains the majority of what's happening here. And this is all the new rulings since April 19th. And if you remember, Title IX was, gender related for sports activities, programming for our schools and athletics. So you have to have an equal number of sports for females as males, as the line away. What's happened here is they've drawn in some new things in this that have to deal with discrimination. And this is a question that's still out there, even though this is something that we have to pass and walk through at the end of this month, because we have to say we're good with this. And we'll share a copy of the actual policy that we've done, which we've worked with Neola on, we've worked with our attorneys on. It's ready to go. We'll send that out to you before the next board meeting so you can see it and check it out. But some of the things that are in here that are a little bit different is the discrimination components, which actually come from Title VII versus Title IX. And so they're trying to make it all part of one. And in talking with our attorneys, this is still up for debate. And so we might see shifts even after August 1st where they'll try to take that out again, because it was do we need this in here or not? And there was more of a fight to say, yes, that was an important part of it. And that came into sex discrimination, treatment based on parental, family, marital status, discrimination of employment, and pregnancy discrimination, which were
some different things that were added into this new policy, 2264. And other than that, we were in compliance with some of the different changes. Like, you have to have 2 individuals who are your investigators and people who are looking into this. Adam Broughton and Chris Schultz have been those individuals. We've had that in our policy, so we didn't have to really do a whole lot with this. Some schools did not have any of that, all right? And so when something comes up, if there's a complaint about any of these things, they would technically go to Adam or to Chris, whoever they feel more comfortable with, and then it's determined by that person whether an investigation is needed, first off. And then if an investigation is needed, they would start that process just like we do any other investigation within our district. That person also, though, that investigator has the right to like really share what their thoughts or feelings on the final say in that is, but they also have to work with the district administrator if it's an employee or a student, you know, who is affected by that. So my hands would still be in it at the end, but you know, in the initial parts and walking through it, those individuals have that right. A change to the complaint used to have to be written. Now it can be just oral. Like, so they can say, hey, I've got this complaint, this is what's going on. So that's a major thing within that. Other than that, I mean, again, process, we've had the process, it's been in place. And again, we've worked with Neola. I'll send you the actual layout of the new policy. We've got the attorney just returned it back saying, yeah, it looks good. Compliance with what we're trying to do. I'll share it with you all. You can read through it. If you have questions for me, please let me know. But one of the things that we're gonna have to do though, as soon as that's approved, we also have to put on our website is saying, here are the 2 people. If you ever need that, that's one of the requirements of this law. And then we also have to train our staff so that they are aware of who's that person contact, how does that happen, what is that grievance approach. But we're waiting for DPI to create that mandated like training, so we're not doing that on ourselves. So just like we have bloodborne pathogens, you know, mandatory reporter, it'll be the same kind of constitute where that staff member will have to follow up and make sure that they know what's going on with that. Any questions on this at all? It's just a big topic right now. It was pushed in the end of June to all of us. We had to move fast. We have to get it through, you know, and approved before August 1. And that's every single school district in the state.
So this will be, you'll send it ahead of the next meeting?
I will, yeah, and I've got it, if you want it earlier, I can send it to y'all too earlier, and just, if you want some reading to do, but it's about, I'd say like 6 or 7 pages of policy. Okay.
Anything else on policy?
Jacob, Terry? Okay.
All right, well, then our next item is to take a motion to go into closed session. So we'll look for a motion to go to closed.
So moved.
Second.
Any roll call on that?
Matthew,
Yes.
Alpern,
Yes.
Eckerman,
Yes.
Huck,
Yes.
Jaeger, yes.
All right, we are going to closed session.
Good night, Oriole Nation.